Happy National Detroit Style Pizza Day, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Friday, June 23rd, 2023. I'm Jer Stays, and today we're going to dive into a holiday that celebrates one of Metro Detroit's favorite foods that has spread around the country and the globe. Of course, Detroit-style pizza. I'm going to do that with a couple of people who are very connected to it. First, author Karen Dybis tells us everything we need to know about Doughtown, and then Wesley Pikula from Buddies, with more than 40 years experience, joins us to tell us some stories of old. And this is just a cool holiday because it's bringing together so many purveyors of pizza from around the country who are slinging pies. And really, this tasty export of Detroit is being showcased. So let's celebrate it and jump into a conversation with Karen. Now, on this Detroit-style pizza day, I can't think of anyone better to talk to than the author of Detroit-style pizza, a Doughtown History, and longtime friend of the pod, Karen Dybis. It is so good to see you.
So good to be here, and so good to be able to celebrate this pizza and this legacy.
Yeah, because although we're recording this at the original Buddies on Conant in Detroit, I want to outline this to people. Detroit-style pizza has become a national thing. You know, obviously there's this day, but, you know, I was sharing with you over on social media about a trip I went to Brooklyn and had all kinds of stuff. Can you share some of this? Because, you know, you write this book and I really think it's great because it kind of puts the stake in the ground that this style of pizza is from here and this is the heart of it.
Yeah, I think that's why, to me, it was important to outline who are the originals, your Buddies, Louie's, Cloverleaf. The second wave, which are the sons and daughters of the original pizza makers who grew up eating it and then wanted to start their own. But then this third wave that's really taking the style, manipulating it, using it as a platform for their own chefy creativity. But sometimes the messaging gets lost that it is based in Detroit, that it has its roots here, and that it should be always understood that these particular tenets of this pizza belong to the city and the residents of Detroit, in my fine opinion.
And we'll get into a lot more of that in a second. But for those who don't know, like what's special about today is the homecoming of so many people in the pizza empires of Detroit, right?
Yeah, I call it the pizza family because the originals started as literally related to one another either by birth or marriage. They came into this business, they worked arm in arm to build up these pizzerias as their sole income. And that's why they were competitive. They needed to survive, they needed to feed babies, they needed to keep their restaurant doors open. But as the pizza has grown and they've expanded and the style has gone literally national and international, I think they've come to realize that not only do they need each other, but if they can support one another in this way, then we can grow this even more. And you'll see the style take root even deeper and always, again, come back to Detroit as its founding city.
Because look, we got to talk a little tea here. There's some people out there in this country who are doing Detroit-style pizza without the credit. And I feel like it's important that that story's out there.
Yeah, because you have 30 store chains who started based in New York City where they ordered frozen Buddies pizza to try before they ever stepped foot in Detroit to actually meet the people making the pizza and try it inside the restaurants. And to me, that's fine if you want to call it Detroit inspired, just as long as you understand that there is a place that depends on this successful branding to take root. And same thing with California. When I see pizzerias in LA or, you know, other locations around San Francisco occasionally slip in that it might be California style pizza, it's not. It's Detroit style. You didn't have the automotive pans. You didn't have the sauce on top. We did. And I always want to make sure that those brands not only reflect the origin story, either on their social media, on their websites, but especially in that conversation. I think the pizza's that good.
So to get people who are maybe new to Detroit or new to this, what are the key definitions for the Detroit-style pizza to you?
To me, I always like to go back to Sean Randazzo. He's the first gentleman that got Detroit Style launched in 2012 when he won at the Pizza Expo in Las Vegas. And he defined it as a high hydration or, you know, a lot of water in the dough crust. So it's light, airy. It's got wonderful crumb, as they put it. So a good size crust. Then you've got your pepperoni usually next. So you have some nice fat and deliciousness on that dough. Then your brick style cheese, If you want to add a little mozz, if you want to add a little bit of cheddar for that richness, but that high fat cheese, sauce on top so that you keep a nice crisp crust. And again, cheese all the way to the corners so that you can get that little frico or grilled cheese edge that is so addicting, so craveable, and really is what gives this style its undeniable connection to Detroit.
So beyond the fact that I'm completely mouthwatering over this, and of course we've got like a couple slices sitting right here, it's one thing to enjoy the pizza. It's another thing to write this book, which if you can hear it, is all about pizza. And to me, it's not just about the technical things that you talked about. There is so much family history and so many ties to the history of our region in this. What drew you to write a Doughtown History?
What impressed me about the pizza industry is that they are unique. A big celebration of what makes pizza great. They're slavishly devoted to technique, and they celebrate one another. And I didn't necessarily see that in Detroit when I started this project. I knew there were pizzerias that maybe didn't get along, but I also knew that there was enough of a history that we could research. So, okay, let's dive into it. And as I realized that so-and-so actually trained so-and-so, and that like Louis Turtois from Louis in Hazel Park worked at Buddy's. And then the old owners of Buddy's left and were hosts at Louis in Hazel Park. Like there were such unique friendships and connections, and then some heartbreak when you'd have like a Sean Randazzo break off from Cloverleaf. And they were still trying to find their way back to each other. And the relationships that still existed needed a little mending in my mind. So it was exciting to learn how much they were connected to one another, but to also hopefully baby step everybody toward understanding a common goal, which is, again, create the best pizza you can, do it all for Detroit, but then celebrate what makes this so special and unique and make sure it got its history cemented so that there could be no denying it going forward, whether it's in Seoul, Korea, or, San Francisco. I don't care where it's based.
What is something that you thought you knew but learned different in doing this book?
I think it was that they literally worked in each other's restaurants. I just assumed that there was maybe a somehow magic moment where the Detroit-style pizza recipe just somehow escaped and went big, but that they each knew one another in such a lovely way. The two Jimmys era of Buddy's, for example, where from 1953-ish, 1954 to 1970, these two guys owned Buddy's and really turned it into a family-style restaurant and added, the bocce experience. To meet them, I had never heard of them. I knew of a little bit of Cloverleaf's history. I knew a little tiny bit about, let's say, that Louis was a time capsule and you have to see it to believe it, to see the Chianti bottles on the walls. So really understanding the makers, their histories, how hard they had to work to keep these restaurants open. And then again, understanding how the Sons of Detroit, as I call them, that second wave, like Via 313, Blue Pan, Jets Pizza, are all influenced by the original makers, was to me a spectacular history to share.
Like I'm getting big vibes here of kind of like the coffee scene where there's like the first wave, second wave, and third wave, It's really interesting to see that.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing, if anything, the book does, it gives a idea that it starts in one place, Buddy's at 6 and Conant, and literal honor and growth comes out of this building to something that a family of immigrants created and perfected. And now it is worldwide because it's just that good. Like, when does that ever happen? And why aren't we talking about that story more? And so I'm so proud of like Buddy's for always carrying the flag of how important the original and authentic is, that their name gets associated with Detroit style, that these other brands stand up for the creators that they honor in their histories. So it's great to see everybody kind of surround themselves and really give this pizza its due.
So I have a very personal question for you, Karen. What do you have on your Detroit-style pizza? What are your toppings?
I am a purist, so I will either eat plain cheese or with pepperoni. I'm kind of the Gus Guerra of Buddy's and Cloverleaf or Louis Turtois from Louis' mindset. I'm a purist. I want just that simplicity of the beautiful brick or mozzarella cheese, the full fat, that crispy edge to the pepperoni, that crunch at the ends. But I'm not going to turn down a Michigan and Trumbull when they add incredible mushrooms or they really spice it up. I love the way that people like a Michigan Trumbull are innovating this and honoring it with the chef's touch.
Well, Karen, I'm sure we're going to catch up again soon. It's been so great to talk to you. Karen Dybis, author of Detroit-Style Pizza, A Doughtown History. Always good to see you.
So great to enjoy a slice of pizza together.
Let's pay a bill, and then we'll talk to Wesley.
As we all live longer, age really is just a number. But retirement is so much more than one. Your Metro Detroit Edward Jones financial advisors want to know what you want out of your retirement, so we can help get you there. Call us toll-free at 866-975-8655. Again, that's 866-975-8655 to schedule an appointment. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Joining me here at the historic #1 Buddies here at Conant in the city of Detroit, Wes Pikula. He is a 40-year veteran of this place and has earned a fancy brand title. You like chief brand officer? Is that what it is now? Something like that?
That's it. It's kind of a fancy title. I call myself the resident historian since I've been here for so long.
I'll take that one. Yeah, it's funny. You get there long enough and eventually, look, a title appears.
That's right. I don't think they could find another title, so that's what they gave me.
So I got to ask you, you have devoted so much of your life to pizza. Why? Like, what is it about Detroit-style pizza that has drawn you to it?
I started here in 1975. I lived in the area. We grew up on the east side of Detroit. My mom had worked here in the early 70s. Of course, it was a really difficult job to get because it was such a busy restaurant, and they were never hiring, so most of the people that got hired here were word of mouth. My mom had told me that they were hiring dishwashers. I had very little experience, obviously, in food service, being only 16. I got hired, and I think they threw me in the dish room with no training the first or the second weekend after I applied. And so, of course, I had never washed a dish. And one thing I did find out about Buddy's early was that the people here were amazing. Everyone helped me. They felt sorry for me. And back then, you didn't have like the plastic aprons or anything like that. So I had, a fabric apron. And of course, we were open at 1:30 in the morning. So you can imagine not knowing how to spray because you have to spray the dishes. And I think I left here like a wet seal. And of course, I had to walk home because, of course, I didn't have a car at the time. So I lived like a mile away. So except that I was squishing the whole way home. So
I can see in your face the memories of those days.
Well, you know what? There's certain things you never forget. And that's one of them.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Is it just the experience of meeting all the people? Or is there something about the food itself? Like what for you?
Yeah.
Tap in.
Our actually basketball team came here when I was in 5th or 6th grade basketball. And Buddy's was legendary in this area. Even before I started here, as little guys, you obviously eat pizza. The go-to back then was Little Caesars because it was, the pizza that everyone could afford. Mm-hmm. But Buddy's was this treat. So I was taken here with our team. And then later, you just realized how amazing this place was because everyone talked about it. It was what other pizzerias were always compared to. Like, is this as good as Buddy's? And of course, at the time, it was the only square pizza. There were a couple other ones. Home of the Pizza was one in the area. But for the most part, Buddy's was the only pizzeria here. And so it had this big reputation, and everybody that wanted to make an impression for family, friends, out-of-towners, of course, you'd visit Buddy's. And so my experience, again, was with this bigger-than-life restaurant that you come in here. It's an old house turned into a restaurant. It had all these different folklore about it. So, it just added to the myth, right?
Yeah.
And so because the food was actually that good. So it wasn't like they talked about it and you came here and you were disappointed. You came here and you were actually overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It was pizza, salad. It was the activity of all the different guests. And really, the other thing that was really fascinating at the time was that the tables were literally put together. So you did have individual tables, but you also had tables where they could seat 2 or 3 parties at one table.
Oh, wow. So like communal seating that they talk about today, that's not a new thing.
Back then, it was a new thing.
Okay.
And they called it Chicago-style seating at the time. But yeah, Starbucks and everybody started doing high tops. But in the beginning, Buddy's had these tables. So I would stand there when I moved out of the kitchen and became a busboy. I would watch the host at the time, how he would arrange people. And if you were waiting in line, and they were lined up here from 5 o'clock till 12 o'clock at night at the time. If your name came up, you got sat. And if there were 3 nuns here and 2 bikers here and 3 guys in suits, y'all sat at one big table. So you could imagine the dynamics of that group put together.
Well, and you got to meet new people. It's a good way not just to have pizza, but to create community.
Create community. And the other thing that you probably would never see now. And so if someone got done eating, let's say, and we weren't wrapping food at the time, believe it or not, it wasn't as common to wrap food. So people would, let's say they were seated at the table, they had 2 pieces left over, they might have a half a pitcher of beer. They would slide it over and say, hey, we didn't touch these, and we didn't only drank half this pitcher. And people would take it.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, that's the whole thing is like times change. But for you, as times have changed, what are some of the things that you've learned in the last 40 years?
What I've learned is how the business has transitioned, right? So when we started, Buddy's Pizza was the pizza. Then as time went on, we did the Republican Convention in 1980. We served the press corps, the National International Press Corps at Cobo Hall at the time. Ronald Reagan was the candidate. So we got so much recognition through that time. Then we started opening up restaurants. And of course, you could see the development of how the menu kind of evolved. People wanted different toppings. All of a sudden, the pepperoni underneath the cheese, which is very signature to Detroit style, people started wanting to see it. So then, so there were variations. And then today, 3 years after we started our Detroit style pizza day, you have a national trend now. So think about it.
Like I was in New York having, I'm going to put air quotes here, listeners, Detroit style pizza, and it's one of those things of like, all of a sudden you're looking at New Yorkers doing this stuff. There's places that have opened up all over the country that they're like trying to copy this.
That's right. New York, I've been to Emmy Square and I've been to Lions, Tigers, and Square. So there's these kind of places.
Oh, so you go to them.
I've had.
Now, do they know who you are?
No, they don't.
Oh, okay.
They don't. Some do, some don't.
Do you wear sunglasses and a mustache?
I definitely come in low profile, but it's interesting because you see the Buddy's history on some of their walls, and like Via 313 in Austin, I've been to that one too. And they sort of list the history. So it's exciting to see how this little place in Detroit on the east side that was formerly a house, then it became a little bar, then later it served pizza in 46. Gus Carrera started it. And then later it was sold. The Jacobs family owned it when I started with them, and how we had great partnerships, great community give-backs that we did through the years. And, as people came in from out of town, particularly with the auto show and things like that, they would come and visit, or baseball teams would come into town. The go-to place after a Tigers game back then was to come to Buddy's at 10, 11 o'clock at night. We have 4 or 5 players come in, whether it's Indians or Royals, things like that. And then you also had Motown. A lot of times we would be called on late into the evenings to deliver backstage. And we delivered to Diana Ross backstage at the old Ford Auditorium. We delivered to the Fox. When Teddy Pendergrass was here performing, he always wanted pizzas at the St. Regis Hotel we stayed at. So, as an employee and working on the floor, I was a dishwasher and a busser, had a clunky old car. Hey, can you deliver these pizzas down here or there? And yeah, you'd be driving at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Thank God I knew the city.
Right.
Because I would have got lost.
What is the favorite celebrity you've met in all this?
I think Zuckerberg was here a couple years ago. I mean, to have the founder of Facebook here meeting with the community here, you had a lot of small shops from Highland Park. They sat here at a round table. He spent about 3 hours here. But, Paul McCartney, there's so many people that have come through here. I mean, I remember one crazy story. This is a little off color, but back in the early 80s, there was a boxer in the city, Leon Spinks. You may remember him. He fought Muhammad Ali and he beat him. But anyways, there was a story in a paper where Leon Spinks had lost his teeth in Highland Park somewhere. So I just started bartending, and I was behind the bar. It was a Saturday night, 3 of us. And so who walks in? Leon Spinks. He has a big fur coat on, and of course he has no teeth. And so he wants to order a drink, and I'm shaking already. I'm so nervous. One, because it's Leon Spinks, but 2, because I can't really understand him.
Oh my.
Now, mind you, he doesn't have his teeth, so he's sort of slurring, and boxers kind of talk through their nose anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So he must have ordered 3 or 4 times from me, and I did not understand what he wanted, and he was getting so frustrated. And the other bartender next to me, he says, I think he wants a Cavassier and Coke. But at the time...
Oh, because it's the voice and then also being so nervous, right? Because you're like sitting there. Once you go, you're going through your head like, oh my gosh, this guy.
Well, it was just in a paper like a couple of days before that. It was in the Detroit News, the whole article about how he got, something happened in Highland Park. He met somebody and he left his teeth behind.
You spent some time as a bartender. What are some of your favorite like matchups? If you're gonna have the Detroit style pizza, what are a couple of things that you like to serve with that, or if you recommend people?
I mean, the antipasto salad was always the go-to. So the way that you ate at Buddy's, you came in, you ordered the traditional pizza, but you started with the antipasto salad, which was in great part the dressing. Connie, who worked here for many years, she developed a dressing. It's an oil vinaigrette dressing. So that was sort of the go-to meal. You had boombas of beer, as they called, so they were sort of a goblet-looking glass, and then you would get the antipasto salad. You would start with that, then you get the pizza. So some people, even the aficionados, as I call them, would actually leave their salad plates that had the residue of the dressing on it, and they would take that slice as it came and lay it right on the dressing, and that was kind of the enhancer for their pizza. But that was typically what people ate. Some would order meatballs to start. Some would order the minestrone soup, which was always a big go-to. And some people just opted for the pastas. It was all homemade. Everything was made from scratch. We had ladies that were here 15, 20, 25 years that would cook everything on a stovetop in big pots. Back then it was pork, veal, and beef in the pasta sauce. So that recipe got modified. I think they took the veal out, but in the early days, that was the go-to pasta sauce.
Yeah. When did you realize or know that you're going to do more than, say, bartending and all the different jobs that you did around here? Because it's like kind of like above the line and below the line.
Oh, sure. So I was going to Wayne State at the time. I was a business major, and this was around 1980, 81. And if anyone remembers 80, 81, the economy was just in a ridiculous, interest rates were 20%. And the owners had taken a liking to me. The Jacobs family was very good to me always. They thought a lot of me. Even as an employee, they would ask my opinions on things. And they offered me a job and said, listen, we'd really love you to stay with Buddy's. At the time, I was thinking of getting into finance, maybe marketing. I did have some job offers. I think I was at a job offer from Campbell Ewald for $4.50, I think, to work in a mailroom. So I opted for Buddy's. I loved people. I loved food service. I loved seeing the faces of the people that walked into the restaurant and had the pizza and had the salad, and watched how people interacted. People call safe space these days. Back then, everything was safe space. Everyone loved everybody. You walked into Buddy's, you shared the pizza, you shared the salad, you shared memories, and I really fell in love with that part of it. And we had a lot of employees very similar to me. We kind of hired word of mouth, so everybody kind of had the same love of guests, love of pizza, love of service. And we all kind of grew together. So when the early stores started opening, a lot of the staff would evolve into these restaurants. I met my wife here at Buddy's. She used to be a server. I was a bartender, my wife, Carolyn. Yeah, it goes back a long way. It's part of your life. That's where I'm at today. It's just, and proud that now Detroit is also got this name that goes to every pizzeria that opens up with this style of pizza. It's going to have Detroit on it. So whether you're in South Korea or whether you're in Toronto, Canada, serving Detroit styles, not just square pizza, or as we used to call it, deep dish, but we always had Detroit's original deep dish, and then later evolved to Detroit style.
I think it's one of the great exports of our area, right? You got cars, you've got music, you've got so many things. For a while back in the day, it was cigars and stoves, but really pizza is one of those things. For you personally, I got to ask this, when it comes to that Detroit style pizza, you said, some people want the pepperoni on top now, whatever. When you order pizza, what do you order?
Yeah, I'm pretty much a traditional pizza eater because I've eaten so many pizzas through the years. I usually just go with cheese and pepperoni light on cheese because I kind of like the crust a little bit more. I like it really light and crunchy. Some people love cheese. I think as you get older, I think you try to cut back a little bit on the cheese. But I actually like the vinegar dressing on it a little bit. And I think the balance of the pizza is what I usually like because I don't like a lot of toppings. Like some people love toppings. I usually like to go at the crust because I know that crust, when it's that buttery kind of flavor with the brick cheese that we use and it bakes in that pan, that adds that flavor. You know, it's like a great burger. It's just the balance of that burger. Like, I'm not a person that's going to put French fries on my hamburger and eat it.
See, that's a weird thing for me. Like, you know, like the Greek places, some of them are starting to do French fries on the on the gyro or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't do it. Like when they're like, let's do it American. No. Keep those fries off of that pita for me. And I think, same kind of thing.
I think if you're a traditional eater, because I like to, like when I do French fries, some people put ketchup all over their fries. No, I put ketchup to the side. I dip my fries.
Okay.
So I'm always one of those people that like to taste the food itself. And then depending on how I want to sauce it, that way I have an option. If someone's saucing it for me, then already they're making my decision, right? So I usually like to do my own.
The next time I do fries with ketchup on the side, I'm going to be like, I'm going to do this Pikula style.
It keeps the French fries hot. So it has a functional aspect to it. It's not just the flavor.
I love this nerdery about this. I like you getting into all of this. Before I let you go, what are you most proud of with, it's Detroit style pizza day. This is something that, the whole world who is into food and into this kind of food has their eyes on Detroit. What are you most proud of looking back at, 40 years of doing all this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's giving back. I think, any business that's been around, that has been around for 77 years, you're not around if you're not giving back. Like I mentioned, we work with so many different charities. This specific celebration it's our partnership with the Salvation Army again. We donate $1 per pizza at 22 of our stores. Every year we've had it, we did the Salvation Army. We just worked at Harbor Light with them. So it's giving back. Anybody that works in food service across the country works very hard. You're giving up weekends. You're giving up a lot of your life to this business. But where the value comes in is not just serving guests, but it's also what you give back to communities that you operate in. And the work that the Jacobs family started, particularly with the Capuchins that we have worked with 47 years, it's a tribute to that family for the vision they had, because, that was a big part of Buddy's, was where can we donate? Where can we give back? What kind of partners are doing good work that we can actually put the money into services, not in a bunch of administrative costs? And we always pick charities where we could say, we see the work they're doing. The money is actually going for services instead of, again, big paychecks.
Well, Wes, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you.
And I thank you for having me.
Wesley Pikula, historian, chief brand officer. It's just weird talking to you for so long. And it's like, oh, there's a fancy title there too. I appreciate your time on Daily
Thank you
Detroit.
very much.
And with that, we are done this week with Your Daily Detroit. Thank you to Cheyenne Serini, who had a big hand in editing this episode, as well as everyone else behind the scenes. Devin O'Reilly will be back next week. He just couldn't make it this week, but look forward to talking to him. As always, feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.